This talk is dedicated to and inspired by Myung Hasening. Those of you who were here last week, you heard that she very suddenly and tragically died in a car crash. She was a Sunim in our tradition, a monastic. She was from Lithuania. And she spent, I don't know, about 20 years training in both Korea and really most of the time in Hong Kong. And she became a Jido Popsanim, which is the first level of our teacher in our school, maybe 2 years ago, something like that. And the cause of her death was quite, I don't know what word to put to it, sad, tragic, shocking. The suddenness of it, she was returning home late at night after a retreat in Lithuania and was hit by a drunk driver, pushed into an oncoming truck. So it was all quite instantaneous. And I found out about it not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, late morning. I picked up my phone and I very casually and without any anticipation, I just opened up my phone. I read some news and then I turned to Facebook, and right on top of Facebook was a notice of this death. And it was seriously like a punch right here. Followed by a "Wah!" Just a complete don't know. Where did she go? Where did she come from? So when we talk about life and death in our school, we always point to this poem that I will read now. And it's a poem that we use in the very first interview, that the very first, maybe what we'd say Zen interview, when we've gotten over the meeting and the discussion, the theoretical discussions about Zen, and we turn towards what is this? And we read this poem. This is part of our funeral ceremony. And ironically, I would say also part of our birth ceremony. So bookends, if you will. It's called The Human Root. And the way we have it in a different book, it's written in both Chinese and English. And I've never found a reference to where this poem comes from. But as far as I know, it's probably from China back in the 900s would be my guess. But for all I know, it was written, well, it had to have been written before 1979 when I first heard it. Anyway, the human root, coming empty-handed, going empty-handed, that is human. When you're born, where do you come from? When you die, where do you go? Life is like a floating cloud which appears. Death is like a floating cloud which disappears. The floating cloud itself originally does not exist. Life and death, coming and going, are also like that. But there is one thing which always remains clear. It is pure and clear, not depending on life and death. Then we ask, what is the one pure and clear thing? Heart! Wake up right now. Boom. This is it. This is our life. We have this fantasy of time. We have this illusion of time and space. But one thing we learn from Myung Hasening is we never know when our last moment is and how important it is to be here, to savor, to participate, to be alive. So you'll see as I go further, I want to talk a little bit about time. And I was doing just some searching around the internet to see what I'd come up with about Zen and time. And this first thing I'm going to read, I don't remember where I found it. Unfortunately, I didn't put down the link, but it was some generic, I think academic style Buddhist and Zen page. If anybody is really interested, I probably could search it out. But I want to read just about a paragraph and a half here. This is the basis of Zen itself, that all life and existence is based on a kind of dynamic emptiness. Parentheses, a view now supported by modern science, which sees phenomena at a subatomic level popping in and out of existence in a quantum froth. So take that in for a second. Phenomena as a subatomic level popping in and out of existence in a quantum froth. We look at our hands, we look at our face in the mirror, we worry about if we're good looking enough, if people will like us. This is our human mind. But at its base, it's this popping in and out of existence. Are we here or are we not here? So here's the next paragraph. In this view, there is no stuff, no difference between matter and energy. Look at anything closely enough, even a rock or a table or this computer that you're staring into right in front of you. And you will see that it is an event, not a thing. Everything is, in truth, happening. This too accords with modern scientific knowledge. Furthermore, there is not a multiplicity of events. There is just one event with multiple aspects unfolding. We are not just separate egos locked in bags of skin. We come out of the world, not into it. We are each expressions of the world, not strangers in a strange lands, not flakes of consciousness in a blind, stupid universe. So what are we? Where do we come from? Where do we go? And what are we doing? We're not objects. You've heard me say this over and over again. We think of ourselves and things around us as objects. But I've been saying we are beings. We're unfolding. This reading called us, we're happenings. We're the essence of this universe revealing itself for one moment. So when I saw the news about Myung Hae-sanin, where I went to was what felt like this great loss. Not so much a personal loss for me, but a loss to this world. She came from Lithuania. She became a Sunim. I believe she was very young, maybe close to 20, maybe even earlier. Very sincere and also very troubled, curious. And she trained hard. I saw one interview with her where she first went to Korea and then went to Hong Kong, and she didn't know the language. And she said in Korea, it was actually pretty easy because she became what we call a hangja. And a hangja is your introduction to becoming a sunim or a monastic. And a hangja is moving from being a layperson to becoming a monastic. And it's about a 2-year training program where basically you're a slave. Basically, you move into the temple, and when you're told to jump, you ask how high. I remember one time I met this, when I was in Korea, I met this Canadian woman who was a Sunim in Korea. And this was even after she had become a Sunim, and her superior was criticizing her for something. And as all of us Westerners tend to do, she began to defend herself and explain why she did what she did. And her superior turned to her and looked at her and said, "Why are you still talking?" Well, that exponentially is the life of a hangja. It's kind of a breaking of our egoic self-centeredness. And once that is broken, then I think theoretically, then we can be trained. But the more we hang on to our egoic self-centeredness, the less we're actually able to take in feedback and to learn and to grow. So this isn't just true for a hangja, this is true for all of us. Our egoic self-centeredness blinds us and shuts us down. And rather than experience life as happening, everything becomes objectified. Us and them, me and you, defense and offense. We enter the world of duality. So often when people die, we think fondly about the person. We think of all the strengths they had. We think of the weaknesses that once they've died, they become endearing. I had an aunt who died maybe 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit more. And in her life, she was a very, very argumentative person. And it was a real mark of who she was. Everybody knew it. And it was both endearing and annoying. At her funeral, it was all endearing. Everybody would just laugh and remember. And I think the point I'm trying to get to is that the person becomes an object to be glorified, to be framed and put on a pedestal or a mantle, but it further objectifies us. But if we go that route, we're just following the path of sustaining the egoic self-centeredness. Of course, all of us want to be spoken well of at our funeral. But if life is a happening, death is the ending of that happening. So to think about Myung Hae and to think too much about her as a person only serves to make her more of an object and less human, less of a human being. But I think what struck me in her death was the deep, deep sadness for the loss that the world now has to bear. All of us, in our activity, in our lives, we create ripples. And those ripples flow out. And each one of us in our daily lives, in our manifestation of being, is impacting the whole in these ripples. And by her death, her ripples, her creating new ripples, although I was going to say is over, except I'm creating some for her right now. And maybe that's what it means to carry on after someone dies. There's this beautiful, sad Kate Wolf song about a friend who died. And the last verse goes something like, "And here's to us all who will carry it on in the lives that we live and the words of our song." So she stops throwing pebbles into the ocean, into the pond, but all the rest of us can be inspired and continue throwing those pebbles into the pond and helping and trying to create a more just, loving, and peaceful world. So my deepest grief for Myung Hae was not for her. I have no idea what happened to her, except maybe I'm talking, and that's where she ends up right now. But more importantly, the loss to the country of Lithuania. You know, Lithuania is a small country. I heard somewhere it was about 2 million people. And her death made the news. It was in the newspapers. It was in the media because there are few enough people that each one you can see makes such a difference. And all the students who had been practicing with her lightheartedness and her willingness to offer herself to the Sangha, it's in that interaction that to me shows the biggest loss. So it's a reminder, do it. Now is the time. The gifts that we each have, and in our own self-critical mind states and our negativity about ourselves, we're always selling ourselves short. Don't buy it. What's true is that each one of us has this unique place in the universe. And as one of the lessons that Myung Hae has shown us is that we don't know the end date. You know, we buy something in the grocery store, it says best used by. Well, for all intents and purposes, best used now. So I want to take a slight turn because the other point that the news about Myung Hae brought me to was a reflection on time. This idea that we have time, that, yeah, life feels like it stretches out infinitely long. And it just made me wonder a little bit about time. And I'd say the first place my mind went to was the dinosaurs. And I had to do a little checking, but I was told that the extinction that the dinosaurs were part of happened about 42 million years ago. So I started to try to conceptualize what is 42 million years. So imagine you're 100 years old. 10 of those lives make 1,000. Another 1,000 of those make 1,000,000. And then 42 of those make 42 million. So is time slow or is time fast? We often have these conventional ideas that it feels like life is going so fast. Often this time of year, it's like, boy, summer is already turning towards the close. This year has moved along so quickly. But try to remember back to January 1st. Look at all that has happened. So in my searching around, I want to read a few things from, I pulled this out of, it's from a book by Katagiri Roshi, and the book is titled, Each Moment is the Universe. And for those of you who may not know who Katagiri Roshi was, he came over here from Japan probably either in the late 60s or early 70s. And he came here to work with Suzuki Roshi, who founded the San Francisco Zen Center. And it was really one of the first Zen centers that started to revolve around what we might call the convert Sangha. So they weren't Japanese folks, it was generally Westerners who gravitated, and was the precursor of something like Empty Gate Zen Center. So here's a few things he talks about time. So he quotes Dogen, who started the Soto Zen tradition. Dogen said that there are 6,400,099,180 moments in a day. I'll say that again, 6,400,099,180 moments in one day. That's such a vast number, we can't even hold it. That's how much happens. That's how much potentiality there is in one day. All life is transient, constantly appearing and disappearing. You are transient, I am transient, and Buddha is transient. Wherever you go, transiency follows you. Transiency is the naked nature of time. Of course, this is the one of the three marks of Buddhism: impermanence. Nothing lasts forever. Everything is in a constant state of flux. But if you think in terms of 42 million years, what feels like vast variation and flux to us is just an even movement. You know, we say that humans evolved from, I don't know how to say this, that monkeys and humans split off of some other life. And in our lifetimes, we don't see that humans are also evolving. It all looks the same in our lifetime. But over the course of thousands and thousands and millions of years, who knows what comes next? Our minds get attached and hold on to some idea. But in truth, we don't know. Back to Katagiri Roshi. The true tempo of time is too quick for your mind to keep up with. So you sense a gap between you and time. Then, because of this gap, you feel that your life is separate from the rest of the universe. When you sense that gap, you can hardly stand it. It is beyond bearing. So our inability to keep up with these 6,400,099,180 moments creates a glitch. And that glitch is what we solidify around. We separate the world into self and other. Suddenly, we're marking time. One of the thoughts that occurred to me as I was working with this is, if you don't count, there's no time. There's light and there's dark. There's light and there's dark. And yes, the amount of light and the amount of darkness is always changing. But it is in our human minds that we make time. When I was talking with somebody about this, they said to me that the Western calendar was the first calendar that was linear. And by making it linear, day one goes before day 100. But in a linear view, time moves all the way back into eternity and all the way forward into the future. That's a mind concept. All the calendars before the Western calendar were circular. It didn't stretch out in all directions. It went around and around and around. So what is it? Is it around and around and around? Or is it linear in its progression? Mind shapes reality. Everything is mediated by mind. And if the speed of time is too fast for us to grasp, that gap creates time and space. All of us, back to Katagiri now, all of us experience a gap between our minds and the reality of time. That is why we suffer. Buddhism teaches us to face the truth of impermanence and to accept the fact that life consists of moments that appear and disappear at super speed. This is hard. We want to believe in the continuity of our lives so that we can say, yes, yes, I exist. So instead of looking directly at time itself, we try to escape the cruel fact that impermanence constantly cuts off our lives. So that's the suffering part. The awakening part is there is no time and space. Right now, we're alive. We're not objects that are fixed in time and space. We're happenings that are flowing with the flow of existence, whatever it is. And yes, our particular shape and form is born into this universe and it dies out of this universe. The Human Root poem that I read earlier, it says, life is like a floating cloud which appears. Death is like a floating cloud which disappears. The floating cloud itself originally does not exist. You and me, we don't originally exist. We're born into this and we die out of it. Life and death, coming and going, are also like that. But there is one thing which is pure and clear, not dependent on life and death. So if we're not dependent on life and death, what are we? How do we show ourselves right now? Our life experience arises out of conditions. The possibility that Myung Hasenin would be where she was at that particular moment, and that at one posting I wrote, the 5 drunken boys driving a brand new Mercedes-Benz had to be right there in that particular mind state at that particular moment. And not only that, the truck had to be coming and everything had to happen just right for this, what I would call horrible experience to happen. It's not just the tragedy that shows us this. It's every single thing in our life. What is there? There are 30 of us on this call. What did it take for all 30 of us to be here right now? And of course, because of the COVID virus, we're living in something of a virtual life. So I say we're all here, but we are also stretched out all over the planet at the same time. So we're here and we're not here. So if we take this in, when we think of infinity, we think of infinitely large. But we forget that infinity is also infinitely small. Just now. One of those 6,400,099,180 moments is right now. Without this moment, we don't exist. This moment and the energy of our lives come together. And my question for all of us is, what will we do with it? If we just live in the world of suffering, then we just maintain the world where we try to get for ourselves what we want and take from others what they may want, but we think is more ours than theirs. The Buddha said very simply, we suffer because either we don't have what we want, or we have what we want and we're afraid to lose it. So either we're grasping or we're defending. But how do we put our hands down and offer ourselves to the moment? Reveal ourselves. And this is what Zen is about. This is what our practice is about. So when you're sitting on your cushion, you're not trying to be a good meditator. You're experiencing the momentary arising of this being, this happening that we mistakenly call ourselves. We're not trying to get anything or be anything. We're just allowing for the unfolding to emerge. And when we step off of our cushion and enter into interaction in this world, then we're bringing our happening to other happenings, the multitude of happenings. And our direction is to offer something that enhances, not takes away. There are so many moments, I won't repeat the number again. In this one, how do you be alive? With 30 different people, and there's a few that are more than one person, so more than 30 people have more than 30 particularities. There's one Zen book by a Japanese Zen master, who I'm not remembering his name, that's titled Refining Your Life. We're not trying to refine our life to become more precious or shinier. Refining in this case means opening, getting out of the way, allowing. Julie, I don't want to shock you, but I see your picture in front of me and I see you holding your son. And I've just so enjoyed your kids walking around and being with you. And maybe it's as simple as that, to open ourselves wide enough. Allow the chaos some room to be without having to make it all exactly right. And to hold each other, to care for each other, to realize that we're not so separate. We seem so separate. Everybody is in their separate little box on my screen. But all of those boxes make up the entire screen. So don't forget, we're both separate and not separate simultaneously. In what feels to be our separateness is the whole universe expressing itself. In the whole universe revealing itself, our separateness is the result. Be it. Use it. Become it. You're a happening, a being, not an object. We objectify ourselves and others in our minds. And in so doing, we sell ourselves short. So wake up. Feel the beauty and the sorrow, the joy and the horror. All of it is this bubbling froth that is our true nature. So I encourage us all to move forward from this in a way that offers the gift that we have to this world. And maybe we can do some healing. Things can change. Thank you. And thank you, Myung Hae Sanim, for your life, for your practice, and for your dedication to all beings.